everybody, it's Emily at ARG Schooling, and today I'm going to do some book recommendations. Today's video, I've been kind of thinking about it for the last couple of days, and I might turn this into a series. I don't know yet. But basically, what I'm going to try to do today, if you are a homeschooling parent and you struggle to figure out what to read, today I'm going to give you some recommendations based on the read-alouds and children's books that you've probably read and loved with your child, and now you want to find something like that for yourself. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm going to do, if you like this, then read that. But it's going to be like, if you liked this middle grade read aloud that you did with your kids, then here is a book like that you could read for yourself. So let's see how this goes. So I tried to choose things that I thought lots of people would have read before for the read aloud portion. So we're going to start with one of my daughter's absolute favorite read alouds that we've ever done. We read this like 3 years ago and she still talks about it, and that is Sweep, A Girl and Her Monster. So this is a story that's set in Victorian England. It's about a little girl who's a chimney sweep, and she's been abandoned by the only father figure she's ever known. She doesn't know why. And she carries with her this piece of char that was left with her when she woke up and he was gone, and that char becomes a golem. So I wanted to find a story similar to this. It has the same charm, but also the same seriousness of the subject matter. And also it has a golem in it. And the story I came up with was The World That We Knew by Alice Hoffman. This story is set during World War II. It is about Jewish resistance and resistance fighters during the Holocaust and World War II. And the main character in this story, her mother creates a golem to protect her daughter during the war. And the golem sort of becomes more human as the story progresses. And I just thought this was brilliant and so beautifully done. And this story has sat with me for so long. I think I read it last year, and I still think about it. And I kind of want to reread it sometime because I want to revisit the characters. One of my favorite things, especially pertaining to Jewish literature, one of my favorite things is stories about golems. I don't know why this appeals to me so much, but it always has. The idea of this creature who is meant to protect, but is also terrifying at the same time because they have such immense power. So both of these stories have golems at their core. That's kind of what they're about, but also they're about bigger things too. They're both about the problems that people are facing in their lives. They're about surviving. They're about trying to find a better life for yourselves. So I feel like these pair well together. The next book I want to talk about is The Wild Robot by Peter Brown. This is, again, one of my daughter's favorite books, but I know a lot of people love this series. It's beloved. It's such a sweet story about a robot who sort of becomes more human and has a soul kind of, and awakens and wants to know more about things that are alive and humanity and that sort of thing. So a book that I think would pair well with this, if you like this story, then I think you would like A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This is a story about a future in which the robots have become the dominant species. And they want to know more. There's and it's very cozy. This is what I consider cozy sci-fi. It's about a tea monk who makes tea and helps people work out their problems. And he's on a quest to go to the next village or something like that, and he meets a robot. And the robot just wants to know more. What's it like to be human? And it's just such a cozy little story. It's short. This is a novella. And I haven't read it yet, but there's a second one out that I really want to get to. But it's just got the same feelings as A Wild Robot. So if you really like The Wild Robot, and Roz and getting to experience a being discovering their emotions and like wondering why they have them and what is it like to be human, then I think A Psalm for the Wild-Built, which is about the same idea, about a robot wanting to know more about what it's like to be human, what makes you a human, then I think that that would be the best option for you if you want to read something similar. Next, I chose Odd and the Frost Giants by Neil Gaiman because it's Neil Gaiman and it's such a cute, fun story about a little boy who is in a Norse village and he ends up meeting up with some of the Norse gods. It's short, it's illustrated, it's a really fun read aloud. And if you enjoyed that and you want something similar, I'm going to recommend The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek. This is a story about Angerboda, who is a Norse god or Norse goddess, and she's the wife of Loki, and their children are very interesting beings. And the story is about the relationship between Angerboda and the other gods and Loki specifically and their children. And it's just a really interesting story. It helps to have at least a little bit of background knowledge about Norse mythology so that you like can piece all the different things together as they're happening in the story. But I don't think it's necessary, but it's just a little more fun if you have some knowledge about these beings and these gods. But the way it's written, it just feels, I don't know if you've seen the show The Vikings or The Last Kingdom. It feels very similar to that. Like it has the same tone and language and just very fun. Like the banter in the story between Loki and Angerboda is fantastic. And I just think it's a really great story. Let's talk about The War That Saved My Life by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. Another just beloved middle grade read aloud. This is a story about Ada, and she has a clubfoot and her mother basically hates her, and she wants to escape this life of being like locked up in her house and never allowed to go anywhere. When the children are being sent away during the London Blitz, she escapes with her little brother and they go to live in the countryside and live with a woman named Susan who was not planning on taking in any children and doesn't really know what to do with them. But Ada is dealing with a lot of trauma and a lot of just experiencing things for the first time, and Susan is just such a great caregiver. And this story is just so wholesome and sweet, but also just sad, but also heartwarming, and it's so many things. This is a great story. So I was struggling to think of like what matches this. So I'm going to give you two options. The sad option and the happier option. So if you want to focus on like the trauma and just the awfulness of war and like a child dealing with trauma, I'm going to give you the recommendation of The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. This is one that I've talked about a million times. I feel like everybody's read this by now, but if you haven't, and you really liked The War That Saved My Life, and you want to read another story about a young girl who is dealing with some trauma from her life before the war begins, and is like learning to grow out of that trauma, then I think The Book Thief is a perfect match for you. The Book Thief is such a beautiful story. It's set in Germany during World War II, and you're following Liesel Meminger, who is coming to live with this family after her mother has to leave her because she's being taken prisoner and put in a concentration camp. And so she is living with this family and kind of like trying to find her place in society. And it's just like the most beautiful story you'll ever read. But it's also incredibly sad. So if you want something a little bit lighter and not quite so heavy, I'm going to recommend The Kitchen Front by Jennifer Ryan. This is a story that is set in England. It's a similar setting to The War That Saved My Life, and it's about like life in England during the war, and it's focusing on these women who are in a cooking contest. So they're trying to find new ways to make their rations more exciting. So this group of women are all competing in this cooking contest, but they're also like coming together and having this found family thing. So it has the same found family element as The War That Saved My Life, and it's very heartwarming, very sweet. Lots of recipes if you're into that sort of thing and you want to try cooking foods that were like common during World War II era England. The book does have recipes in it for all the things that they're making for the show. And it's just a really like light-hearted read about a very heavy topic. Next, I want to talk about A Rover's Story by Jasmine Warga. This is a newer book, and it's about the Mars rover. And it's like as if the rover is telling the story about like his existence and his trip to Mars and what that means to him and getting to explore and all of those things. Like, this is a really fun read aloud and full of science and learning about Mars and Mars rovers and space exploration and all of that. So if you read that and you really liked it and you want something for an adult, I would recommend The Martian by Andy Weir. Again, this is a book that probably lots of people have already read, but if you haven't and you're looking for something similar to A Rover's Story, then I think this is your best bet. This is a story about Mark Watney, who is an astronaut, and he's on this space exploration trip to Mars. And they land there, and there's a problem, and they're supposed to set up a camp and study the surface of Mars. And there's a problem, the others are able to leave, and he gets abandoned there. And now he's stuck alone on Mars for a really long time. How do you survive that? And it's really interesting. Like, the science and everything is all very accurate. Like, growing potatoes on Mars, and like just so much stuff. There's rovers, there's lots of science. It's really interesting and a lot of fun. And very readable. Like, I did not expect to love this as much as I did, because when I choose sci-fi, I'm not looking for the hard science stuff usually. I'm looking more for like a fun romp through space or something of that nature. This somehow really appealed to me. Like, I'm still baffled, but it's brilliant, and it's made me a huge Andy Weir fan. So if you haven't picked this up yet and you're looking for something similar to A Rover's Story, this is the best. My last recommendation is going to be based on Fever 1793 by Laurie Halse Anderson. This is a fantastic story set in 1793 based around a disaster. In this case, it's based on the plague, the flu or illness that struck the city of Philadelphia. And we're following one character as she is navigating like how to survive this and trying to help people whenever she can and just trying to survive this experience. And it's like a closed setting, and that it's focused on this one city and the experiences of this one person living through it. And I'm going to recommend The House is on Fire by Rachel Beanland. This is a story also about a disaster. And this time we're in 1811. It's like 2 decades later, and we're focused on one place. We're focused on the city of Richmond in 1811 and a disaster. In this case, a fire in a theater. And you're following the perspective of 4 different characters, each of them having a different experience on the night of the fire and the aftermath of that event. I think these are similar because they're both focused on a disaster. They're both focused on one setting, in this case, in both cases a city, but one is a pandemic where everyone's falling ill and trying to figure out how to deal with the illness, and the other is a fire in which a lot of people died, and the survivors are trying to like make sense of what happened and who was the hero and who was the villain and why was this done and like could it have been prevented and how did people behave in the event and in the aftermath. So I feel like they're very similar in tone. So if you really enjoyed Fever 1793, I think you would really like The House is on Fire, because I feel like tonally they're very similar and they're both really excellent books. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you liked this and you want me to do more recommendations of this nature, let me know and I will come up with another list. I had such a good time pulling this together and like thinking about like what I loved about each of these like middle grade read aloud books and what books I thought paired well with them. So I hope you had a good time listening. I hope that I gave you some options and that you're going to read something. If you have any other recommendations that you think go with any of these, also leave them in the comments down below for a great resource for looking for new book recommendations. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Happy reading. Bye.